You have to agree with me that making a short with a perfect crotch depth is a major challenge, not just for beginners. In this video, I'll be showing you guys how to make a short pants with the perfect crotch depth. Now, if this seems like something you're interested in, let's get right into it. These are the materials you'll be needing for this tutorial. I have my fabric, a crepe fabric, which is about 1.5 yards. This is a little stretchy and it's what I'll be using to draft. Then I have my drawing tools, I have my scissors, I have my rule, my marker pen and pins, and I have my pattern paper. I'll be drafting on the pattern paper because I want you guys to see everything. Now let's get into it. Starting from the top of the pattern paper, you come down by 1 inch, and this is going to serve as your starting line. After marking the 1 inch, just take your rule and connect that together like so. I just want ahead to mark 1 inch from the side front, and I ruled a straight line across of that, so I'm going to level down my side front. Sorry, I used SB, it's supposed to be SF, and this is my center front. Next measurement to be marking will be the crotch depth measurement. Now, to know how to get your perfect crotch depth or that of a client you are making, what you need to do is to divide the hip measurement by 4, and whatever you get from that, depending if you are making a high waist or a below waist short. If it's a high waist, you add about 2.5 inches, and if it's not, you add about 1.5 inches. So divide the hip measurement by 4 and add 2.5 or 1.5 depending if it's high waist or not. What I have here is 14 inches for my crotch depth line, and the length is about 18 inches, and I'm going to add 1 inch for stitching allowance below. And I'm just going to mark that across and rule a straight line, just like you see me doing. Something I usually do to get my hip line, and it has worked for me and other people have made shorts or trousers for. I usually come up from my crotch depth line by 2 inches, and that's going to serve as my hip line. I'll just be labeling all my points, the hip line, the crotch depth line, and then the length of my trousers. Keep saying trousers, please, the length of my shorts. And then the next thing, now I'm going to divide my hip by 4, and then on the hip line, on the crotch depth line, sorry, you're going to mark your hip measurement divided by 4. Okay, after marking that, you're also going to mark that on the waistline, and you're going to rule a straight line to connect these 2 points together. The next measurement you'll be marking will be your crotch depth extension measurement. And to get the crotch depth extension, you have to divide your hip measurement by 20. And whatever you get there is going to be your crotch depth. Okay? For me, 46 divided by 20, I had about 2.3. So I just approximated that to 2.5. So if you get 1.8 for your crotch extension, you might just approximate that to 2. If you get 2 point something, you might just approximate that to 2.5. It's like that, depending on the person's hip size. Now I'm just going to mark 1 inch from that point there. Then connect my crotch depth extension into a curve just to get my crotch depth curve like so. On the waist, I'll be marking my waist measurement divided by 4. So you'll be marking your waist measurement divided by 4 on your waistline. And after marking that, you're going to mark 1 inch for that. To get the point for my dart, I'm just going to put my tape on all the full measurement I have on my waist. And then I'm going to fold my tape into 2 and mark the midpoint, and that's the point where I'm going to mark my dart. Okay, I'm going to come down by 5 inches for my front dart, and I'll just connect that together. Come out by 1/2 inch on both sides of your dart point, and then connect that into the 5 inch that you marked as the dart length. On the center front of the waistline, I'm going to come down by about 1/2 inch, and this is going to help me to reduce any form of bulge in front of my short. And I'm going to connect that into the measurement of my waist, just like this. Now just connect that into the hip line, just like you see me doing. I'll just connect my crotch depth line into the crotch depth curve from the 1/2 inch I came down by, just to make it visible. On the length of my short, I'm going to come in by 1/2 inch, and this is just to give a little fitting. Now note that this particular process, this particular point is not necessary. Okay, you can just leave yours straight like that, but I'm coming in by 0.5 inches and I'm connecting it together from the full length into the crotch depth line, and then blend it into the hip line like so. The next measurement you'll be taking will be your thigh measurement on the length of your short. Divide your thigh measurement by 2 and mark it on the length of your short. Now connect it into the crotch depth curve line like so. Now I'll just be outlining the other parts of my shorts with my marker and also writing out the inches I added. Here I added 1 inch for the hem. To the center front, add a ½ inch to the crotch depth line and curve. And this ½ inch is going to serve as your stitching allowance. So that's what I'm just going to do here. Also on the waistline, add about ½ inch stitching allowance to the top of your waistline, just like I'm doing, and connect it together using your curve rule like so. Just to go over this again, I added 1 inch to the hem of the dress. I'm not adding any stitching allowance to this side. I added 0.5 to the crotch depth and curve, 0.5 to the waist, and I'm not adding to the side front, okay? This is because this part I didn't add any stitching allowance. I'll be doing it on the back piece. Now I'm just going to label that my front part, which is 2. I'm going to cut out 2 pieces for this front. Now I'll go ahead and cut this out. Now don't forget that you're taking out your band from your pattern paper. I'm just going to close in the darts because your band do not need the darts. So I'm just going to close that in. The band measurement I'll be taking out from my front piece is going to be 1.5 inches. So I'm just going to mark that and connect it together like so. If you took note of your band length before placing your measurement, you don't need to do this. But if you placed all your measurements, including your band length, into drafting your pattern, then you need to take out your band from your pattern, okay? Now I'm just going to place that. I'm not taking out my band now. I'm placing everything on my fabric and I'm going to cut this out. Done cutting out 2 pieces for my front, and this is what I have. So we are done with the front now. I'm going ahead and draft the back piece. For the back pattern, from the top part I came down by 1.5 inches, and then on the side back I also came in by 1.5 inches, and this is because I'm going to be putting all my stitching allowance on the side back because I didn't put any on the front of the pattern. And I just labeled my side back and my center back, okay? Just like you did in the front pattern, mark your crotch depth measurements from the waistline and then the length of your short and 1 inch for stitching allowance at the hem, and rule a straight line across. Mark your hip line measurement, which is 2 inches above the crotch depth measurement. I'll just label the line, the waistline, the hip line, the crotch depth line, and the length of my short. Just like you did on the front pattern, mark your hip measurement divided by 4 on your crotch depth and also on your waistline, and connect that with a straight line. On the waistline, you mark your waist measurement divided by 4, add 1 inch for that, and then take the full measurement of that waistline measurement and then divide it by 2, and that will be your dart point. You come down by 6 inches for the dart length. I'm just making sure that I'm going to get a straight line there, and then I'm going to connect that with a straight line. On the both sides of your dart point, just come out by about ½ inch and connect that into the dart length like so. Then connect the measurement you have on your waistline into the hip line, just like you see me doing. At the center back, you're going to come up by 1 inch. Remember, for the front we came down by ½ inch to reduce bulge. Here we are coming up by 1 inch. And this is because we needed to cover the butts properly. So I'm just going to connect that with my curve just like so. Now you have to make sure that the measurement you have on your waistline is same as the 1 inch you came up by on the waistline. And for me, it's the same thing. On the length of the short, you come in by ½ inch just to give it in. Like I said earlier, it's not compulsory. So I'm just going to connect that into the crotch depth line, my hip line, like so. The crotch depth for the back, you remember for the front we used 2.5. That I used 2.5 after we calculated our crotch depth extension. Now from what I got for my front, I'm going to add an extra 2.5 inches. So you can add an extra 2.5 inches or 3 inches depending on the person's side, but 2.5 inches is perfect for everyone. So I'm just going to mark that there, and I'm going to extend my hip line by 2 inches for my back piece, and I'm going to connect it with a curve. Now that I have my crotch curve for my back pattern, I'm going to mark the zip, how many inches I want the zip to be on my back, center back. So it's going to be 8 inches. I'm using 8 inches, and my zipper allowance is going to be about 1 inch. So I'll just mark the 1 inch and I'll connect that together. I'll just be blending my zipper allowance into my waistline, and also I'm going to also connect that into my crotch depth curve, just like this. And I'll just be using my marker to just join them together and make it visible. Now just add your stitching allowance to your waistline, 1/2 inch stitching allowance to the waistline, and connect that together. Going to raise the 1 inch allowance I added at the hem, and just like we did in the front, you are going to mark your thigh measurement divided by 2 on the length of your short. You mark that and then connect it into the crotch depth curve. Remember, we didn't add any stitching allowance to the side of the front pattern. Now we are going to add that, and to this side we'll also be adding stitching allowance. Okay, so I'm going to be adding a 1 inch stitching allowance to the side back, which means 1/2 inch is going to the front and 1/2 is going to the back. So basically we are stitching the both of them down by 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to mark the 1 inch and connect that all together. On this side of the center front, I'm also meant to add 1 inch, but as you can see the space is not enough, so I'm going to do that on the fabric. Now I'll be adding 1/2 inch to my crotch depth curve, and I'm going to connect that together. This is my stitching allowance for the crotch depth at the back. Just going to label the 0.5 inches I added at the crotch curve, and then this is my zipper, which is 1 inch. I'm just going to cut this out and then cut it out on my fabric. To this part we didn't add any stitching allowance to, because I didn't have enough perform paper. We'll be doing that on the fabric. Now I've placed this on the fabric, and I'm just going to add 1 inch to this side, mark it on the other side, and connect this together, and then I'll use my scissors to cut this out. Now we are done cutting out the back piece. Remember that we cut out 2 pieces of this, so now we are going to cut out our band. I already went out to cut out my band, and I cut out my band by 4 inches for the width, and for the length I used about 33 inches. 32 inches is my waist measurement, so I added extra 2 inches for the zipper allowance. Always try to add extra inches, even higher than what you have in total, just so you don't run short on materials. Okay, I'll just go ahead and iron interfacing to this. I'm done ironing the interfacing, and I've gone ahead to fold one part by 1/2 inch, which I'll be using to finish up the band on my waist. Okay, so I'm just going to fold that and keep it aside. We are done cutting out, and all our parts are ready, the front, the back, and also the band. Now it's time to sew this. Now before I go ahead and start sewing, I have my band here, so I'm going to be taking out 1.5 inches from the top of my shirt, and this is because I didn't take note of my band height when I was drafting out my pattern. I put all the measurements, so I'm just going to take out the 1.5 inch from my band, which I already cut out. I'm cutting out the 1.5 inch for the band, both at the front and the back part, and now I'm going to stitch down the zipper by 1 inch. Don't forget to use a loose stitch, because you're still going to lose this out, and the other side by 1/2 inch. For the front part, I'm going to use 1/2 inch to stitch down the crotch part. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to my machine and do that. I've done that, and this is what it looks like. I've stitched down the front part by 1/2 inch all the way through, and I've gone ahead to iron it out neatly. And also for the back piece, I've joined that using 1 inch for the zipper allowance. I used a loose stitch to join the zipper allowance part because I'm still going to lose it, and the remaining part of the crotch curve I used 1/2 inch stitching allowance. So I've also gone ahead to iron this out. Place the front piece on the back piece, right sides facing each other like this, and then go ahead and stitch it down by 1/2 inch on both sides. And also sew down this part of the short, this crotch curve part, by 1/2 inch. Done doing that, and this is what I have. I'm done stitching down the sides by 1/2 inch and this other side of the crotch by 1/2 inch. Don't forget to sew in your dart. Okay, remember that when we were drafting out the pattern, we had our dart on there. So I'm just going to take note of my dart because I forgot to notch my dart while I was cutting this out. So I'm just going to take note of the dart, mark it, and then stitch my dart down. For the back piece, I'm going to come down by 5 inches and I'm going to just connect that together. I'm going to notch my dart and I'm going to notch it on the other side of my back piece too. I'm just going to do the same thing to my front piece. I'm doing this because I forgot to notch my dart, so please do not forget to notch your darts when you are cutting your fabric. I'm done marking and notching my dart, so I'm just going to go to my machine and stitch down my darts. Done stitching down the dart, and what we'll be doing now is to stitch down our waistband to the waist. I've already gone ahead to lose my zipper allowance, and this other part of the band, I'm going to place it right side facing the fabric, and I'm going to stitch it down all around. For the remaining part of the band, I'm going to fold it into the back. That's why I folded it into 1/2 inch when I was ironing this, and I'm going to put it in the line that I stitched down the first time. In between the line that I stitched down the first time, I'll go to my machine and stitch in between. To make this easier for you to stitch down when you go to your machine, always make sure to iron it. Okay, when you iron it, it's going to be easier for you to stitch down. I went ahead to just iron mine before going to my machine. It just makes everything come out really neat and it makes it easier for you. Done stitching my band to my short, and this is how neat it looks. I use the stitch in the ditch method. The next thing I'll be doing now is to attach my zipper to my shorts, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll be attaching the zipper to the shorts using the 1 inch I gave as a zipper allowance. I'm done attaching my zipper to my short, and this is how beautiful my short came out. I've also gone ahead to sew down the hem of my shorts, and I've ironed this out. So I'm just going to go ahead and try it now. This is how beautiful my shorts came out after I was done, and it fits just perfectly. I hope this video was really helpful. Do not forget to like, to comment, to share, and do not forget to hit on that subscribe button and turn on your post notification whenever I post a new video. See you guys in my next tutorial. Bye.